Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I am your host, Brad Whipple, and on today's show, we are talking about Star Wars Into the Dark by Claudia Gray. It is the third book released as part of Star Wars The High Republic era, which just recently launched in January. We are now in February. Hard to believe. Joining me, as always, if we're talking books, we're talking with Sarah Haas. Welcome back to the show, Book Guru. Keep calling you that. It's going to catch on. We'll make t-shirts.
Oh, thanks.
It's great. Change your handle on Twitter to Book Guru Sarah.
Ooh,
221.
That sounds like a very scary name to put on my Twitter handle, because then people think of me as authority, which is like the opposite of what I want people to think of me as on the internet, because that puts a lot of pressure on a person. I do love books though, so I'm glad to be here.
Sarah, it's good to have you back because we have recorded a couple episodes so far to start the year. We did a preview episode, Light of the Jedi, A Test of Courage, and now this is our third and final installment of this first phase of the High Republic. We've come so far. So many tags in our book that we've had to take out and translate to a Google Doc. So much work, so much blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
And we made it. We got at least probably somewhere between 20 to 35 pages of notes.
Yeah.
I would say even maybe closer to 50, honestly. We went above and beyond.
Between the two of us, I have a Google Doc that is not one of our shared Google Docs, so that's probably somewhere near accurate. Like 35 pages or of notes or so.
This is why me and you just talk books now, because we just have a lot of notes. There's just a lot of things going on. Yeah. We can't put that on anybody else, really.
No. That'd be kind of cruel, I think.
I'm excited to talk about Into the Dark because we love a good Claudia Gray book. When was the last one? Master and Apprentice? That was almost 2 years ago. Yeah. Celebration Chicago, the Master and Apprentice exclusive edition came out then. And it's been like pretty much 22 months, and now we got another Claudia hit, and we're waiting on the next one at this point now.
Oh boy, you saying like 22 months really just, oh boy.
Yeah, scary stuff. I know. I'm sorry for those of you listening who are just like now having a quarter life crisis like we are. We're just sitting here being like, what's going on?
That means our friendship is almost 2 years old. How exciting is that?
Wow. Oh my gosh, you're right. This podcast is almost 2 years old too.
Look at that. I love that. That's so exciting.
Look at us.
But also, like, it's just so weird to be so far from that convention.
It is. It feels very weird. And it just feels very weird that we're still in lockdown mode, but at least we have our books. And we can be safe inside reading all day long. And we are going to hit that Goodreads goal this year. We keep saying it every episode. We're going to hit the Goodreads goal. It's going to happen.
What's your Goodreads goal, Brad?
I think my Goodreads goal is like 55 or something.
Okay.
So what about you?
I'm at 70. My goal in the past years, we might have talked about this before, but my goal in past years has been like 52, 53, like a book a week. But I read 115 books last year, so I really wanted to kick it up a little bit, but in a doable manner. So I hope we'll get it this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to all of you out there who have been reading along with us and listening to our episodes, we hope you enjoy, because we are going to be covering so many Star Wars books this year. Your head's going to spin.
So many.
And I'm excited to talk about what our next books are after this episode at the very end. So if you want to know what's next, stay tuned. But Sarah, we're going to talk a couple things today. We're going to start with some High Republic news. I think that's always a fun way to kind of introduce the episode and talk about what's happening, because we definitely have been getting some reveals even between our different recording dates. And then we'll have a spoiler-free section as we've had for previous episodes, and then we will just kind of go full spoiler discussion on Into the Dark and everything around the Force, the Nile, the Drengir, all of the above. It's just going to be a grand old time, and I'm super excited because this book had a ton to talk about, a ton of fun stuff too, and Claudia is very, very humorous in the way she writes, and I love it. It's so good. Yeah. So kick us off with our first bit of news.
Oh my gosh, our first bit of news is do we want to go in chronological order from when it happened or chronological order from today backwards? I mean, like, what do you want me to start with?
I think I know what you want to start with, Sarah, because you love a good bookshelf aesthetic.
Okay, I really just want to talk about Star Wars Del Rey's switch from mass market paperbacks to trade paperbacks. This was the most welcome news. Let me tell you, I know some people are very, very attached to their mass market paperbacks, and if that is you, I am sorry that this is a change that's happening. But I can't relate. I really can't. I'm so sorry. Trade paperbacks are king. A good floppy paperback, there's nothing better. And as a person who works in a place that shelves all of the Star Wars Del Rey books together, it is kind of weird to see like 3 hardcovers and then like 15 mass markets. And I don't think that is very attractive to new readers and to readers of like demographics of readers that are younger, and that I think generally are like women, young women, because if you think about the romance section publishes initially in trade paperback. Some romance publishes initially in mass market paperback, but those are often 2 different styles of romance, and they're often for 2 different kind of groups. But my point being, trade paperbacks are awesome. They're floppy. They're a little bit larger. They're cute. And I love them. And I'm still really, 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 really excited about it.
Yeah, I love trade paperbacks, especially for the floppiness.
The floppy.
I mean, one thing I will say is if you love your mass market paperbacks, don't send hate messages to Del Rey, because apparently Tom was getting a lot of nasty GMs, and I'm sorry, Tom.
That's unfortunate. I just want to say, how dare anyone? How dare anyone? I get it.
How dare.
I get it. If you are a collector, if you have every Legends paperback novel in mass market, I can understand that this can be an upsetting moment. But in no way does it mean it is okay to harass anybody over this change. Like, I don't like mass market paperbacks. I'll talk about it on my own time, but like, I'm not going to go yell at anybody about if they publish a mass market paperback. That's fine. That's their choice. That's what makes the most sense for the publisher and the buyer who they're targeting. But like, come on, people. Have
Check
a
yourself.
little bit of class. Just the tiniest bit. So if you did that, shame on you. You should be ashamed. And if you didn't do that, good for you. You were a decent person.
Yeah, congrats to being a good person.
Yeah.
And I will say
the bare minimum.
Victory's Price will be the last mass market paperback to fit the rest of the Alphabet Squadron trilogy. So, I don't know, I might buy it in mass market just to kind of have the final mass market Star Wars book. And of course, it's one I would love too. Mm-hmm. So, that would be a good thing to have. But I'm very excited that moving forward, we're going to get trade paperbacks. Very excited. My shelf will look a little bit better when you put the paperback up against the hardcover. Yeah. And it's just going to look a little bit more consistent, which I'm very excited about.
And I will say that Disney Books is already doing that. Their copies of things like, Queen's Peril and Shadow, Lost Stars, Leia, those are all out in trade paperback formats as well. And they look great. Leia, Princess of Alderaan specifically, looks awesome in paperback. So, I hope that if you're a mass market fan, you can still enjoy the trade paperbacks. And the good thing is the hardcovers are here to stay. So, it's all good in the hood. We're good here.
It is.
We're good here.
We're good.
We love a good hardcover, so.
Yeah. So our next bit of news is the High Republic show hosted by Christina Ariel has launched.
Woohoo!
It is awesome. It is a lot of fun. It includes a lot of great interviews, some cool reveals. That's going to be once per month, so expect to tune into that, because if you want like the next bit of High Republic news to get you through to the next release, I think that's where you're going to kind of get the piecemeal reveals of what's coming, and very, very exciting stuff. But before we get into what was revealed on this last episode, definitely want to address the elephant in the room and talk about, just the fact that I think there's a lot of hateful rhetoric and awful things that were thrown towards Christina over the last couple of weeks, and it was really great to see the Star Wars community come to her defense. But nobody should have to go through that. if you're having a problem with somebody, pointing out that systemic racism exists, or you don't think it exists, or those sorts of things, you're wrong. It's something that, like, it's something you can't deny. And if you do deny that, then this probably isn't the podcast for you to listen for. But we fully support Christina and the work that she's doing. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. If you follow her on her Twitter or Instagram, you see just how passionate she is about what she does and how much she loves the things that she discusses, whether it's Marvel or Star Wars. Like, she just loves everything, and she's positive. She's a great host. They couldn't have picked a better person. Mm-hmm. Very lucky to have her as part of the Star Wars family at this point. And if you're getting on her case, and if you're being, excuse my French, an asshole, check yourself. Figure out what's going on in your life to be that way, and stop being that way, because it's really not right, and it's not right to anybody.
Yeah, I will echo what you said, in that Christina is an excellent host. This is an excellent first episode. It far exceeded my high expectations of the show. Just, to talk about the show itself. But Christina seems like a lovely, lovely person. And whether she's a lovely person or, like, not someone you'd mesh with, it's not okay. It's not okay, the hate she received. And I also think we have to realize, as a fandom, and continue to root out the bad actors in this fandom who maliciously, relentlessly go after people, specifically women, minorities, groups that are often marginalized. So, just look out for your friends. Look out for the people in this community. Do report, block, report. When you see harassment or aggression, it's not okay. And yeah, it's so deeply upsetting to see that this happened to Christina, to Justina, to anybody.
Yeah,
anybody.
Yeah. Let's not forget Justina's getting a lot of it too, for sure.
Whether they be a fan or creator, we have to do our part to really be better about this. And it is a community-wide effort, and I think it's important to realize that these bad actors exist within this larger Star Wars community. And even if it's a societal problem, we still need to do our part to root them out in this community.
Yeah, it is a fandom problem as much as a societal one. You're exactly right, Sarah. And we just have to create safe spaces. We have to call it out when we see it. And it just has no place here. It's absolutely unacceptable. And again, if you are one of those people who are racist, if you're a racist, don't listen to this podcast. I don't know what to tell you. We don't want you listening to our show. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And you're just not welcome here. But for all those who are good, decent human beings, and you came to her defense and you were vocal about it, if you have a platform and you were vocal about it, which if you have a platform, you should be talking about this, because big names in the fandom especially need to be addressing these situations. And I'm really glad to see some of them are doing that, but there's still a large portion of the fandom that isn't. And we need to change that, because we are all responsible for creating a more safe space for everybody. And making actually Star Wars is for everybody true, because that's often said, but it's often not felt to be the case by marginalized people historically. So we really need to change that, and it's a group effort, like you said. So I want to talk about the actual show. Again, Christina did a fantastic job, Sarah. And the biggest news really was we got, I think, the release date for Edge of Balance. I don't know if we actually had that before, but it's coming out on June 8th. And we're getting 3 characters, one of which we already know is Stellan Gios. And the other, who is on the cover of the book, is Lily Tora Asi. And we're getting another Wookiee named Arkoff. Is he related to Burryaga, Sarah, is the question.
I think it's offensive that you would ask that. Not all Wookiees have to be related. Not all people in the universe have to be related, Brad.
I know. But, what if they were brothers? That'd be kind of cool. Wookiee brothers? We don't really see, Wookiee family members. I'm holding out hope.
We need some more Itchy and Lumpy in our lives, is what you're saying here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I want to say, I think the other most important thing that came out of this episode that was like it was not highlighted. It was just mentioned by Michael Siglain that this has been in his head since 2014. We were initially talking that they had been working on this since 2018, but it's clear that they started production, like, quote unquote, pre-production on this years prior, which is really exciting to know that this has been the further back that this project keeps going, they're like, oh yeah, we had this back in 2003. I'd be like, oh my god.
Yeah, we've been doing this since 1967. What?
Like, incredible. But no, like, the fact that they have been doing this for so long and have been thinking about this for so long is so exciting to me, because it tells me that they know where they're going, that they know they want this to be a big thing, and it makes me really excited, and it's excited to be excited.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah, I'm just feeling so good about Star Wars publishing. I mean, no matter what happens in television or like the movies, I love reading. That's why we're here. That's why we're just about to start talking about Into the Dark in just a couple seconds here. We just love books, and the High Republic is just so much fun. It's just such a new world. It's so well thought out. It's not just one of those things that they're kind of slinging out just for the sake of the dollars, which obviously it's a for-profit business and they do want to make money. But also this is something that a lot of care and energy was put into, a lot of thought. It took them 6-7 years to launch this initiative, if it's been in his head since 2014. So, that's pretty neat. I'm very happy to be here with you talking about more books.
Yeah, I'm glad we're doing this. I like how we were like, Sarah's gonna be on for book episodes, and then book episodes became like
pretty much everything.
The thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I'm glad about it, because books are great. And again, Star Wars publishing is really just at the forefront of new bold storytelling. And I know that some people would disagree with that and say that no TV is or no movies are, but I feel that you can do so much with the books that you can't necessarily do in movies or TV. And so it's really exciting that this new time period, this new initiative is starting out in publishing. And the characters, everything is great. I love it.
And we're getting a TV show called The Acolyte that is set in the High Republic. We keep forgetting that. I keep forgetting this at least. But that's crazy. That's awesome.
Forget about it. But I feel like it's so far out into the future, and it's going to be like set at the end of the High Republic, that it's going to be a little bit different than what we're feeling in these books, I feel.
Leslie Headland, if you're listening to this podcast, which I'm sure you listen to every episode of Friends of the Force, please, for the love of God, put Geode in The Acolyte. Whatever you do, get Geode in The Acolyte. Just in the background, like a Chopper appearance in Rogue One, like Geode just sitting in a cantina bar, just having a blast, having a night out with the boys, back taking shots. Have him in there somehow on, Coruscant. Do it. Put him in there. That's all I gotta say.
You know how we talked about Geode doing keg stands?
Yeah.
Geode, keg stand, in The Acolyte.
Yeah, make it happen. Make it happen. Geode's a wild man. We're going to talk more about Geode in just a little bit. So no, not too many spoilers here yet. But speaking of Into the Dark, Sarah, I think it is time now to turn it over to our discussion on Claudia Gray's Into the Dark. Again, this first part here is going to be non-spoilers. So if you haven't read the book and want to know our impressions, this is the time to listen. And then you can go read it, because I know you're going to want to read it after we talk about it here. And you'll come back and listen to the rest. And if you've already read it, great. Welcome aboard. This train has just left the station. It is going to be a bumpy ride, but in the best way possible. It's going to be a great ride with refreshments, with those nice little pretzel bags that you get. It's going to be nice. You're going to get the little like Sprite they put in a little plastic cup.
Oh, heck,
it's going to be great.
This is good. Great.
This is like first class treatment. Sarah.
Yeah.
What are your overall thoughts on Into the Dark by Claudia Gray?
This is Claudia's world, and we're just all living in it. And that is okay with me.
It's true.
Yeah. This book is great. It is so much fun. The characters are all so well crafted and round and truly interesting and different from characters that we've seen before. even if we've seen a pilot before, we've seen the Jedi before, we've never quite seen them like this. The more academic side of things, the more, or rather the less adventurous seeking type people. They're not warriors. And I love them. These characters are excellent. I feel like they were made for me. If you're a person who loves books and history books, you will like the characters in this book just as much as I have, I imagine. So this was a book that really spoke to me. I felt like it was written for me, which is like the best feeling in the world. So I had a blast reading this one.
Sarah, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, this book is just like a warm hug. It's like you put on a Snuggie and you like sit in for the night and you read it and you just feel like you're at home with all your friends, even though we're all social distancing. It's great. It's definitely one of my favorite books of the last couple years, especially some of Claudia's best work, in my opinion. And maybe it's just because I'm on that High Republic high right now, but I really do think that this book progresses the story of the High Republic forward in a meaningful way. It adds to things that have been introduced or talked about before. And also, it's weirdly enough, I read Light of the Jedi, Test of Courage, and Into the Dark. And for me, that just personally was the best reading order. And I almost feel like Into the Dark was sort of the capstone of everything. It was sort of that, hey, you've read the first two. This is like your senior year for phase 1 of the High Republic in 2021. Like, this is what will kind of kick you off and make you want to wait for the next couple books that are going to come out. Like, this is the proper final book to read before this long wait of, until summer. And I think that just speaks to its strength as a standalone book to say, hey, we have all these interesting characters. We bring up all these interesting topics, but Claudia doesn't really over explain. She just kind of like picks your brain a little bit and introduces these new concepts, and you want to learn all about it, but in like the most appropriate way possible and in like a very impressively written way, and something that like keeps you flipping every single page and being like, I need to know more. I need to figure out like what's happening. And even though it starts a little slow, I think the first half of the book is really character focused. The conversations between them, kind of that intimacy on the vessel. It's literally the ship is called the Vessel. Which is hilarious. But that intimacy of all the characters talking and getting to know each other and kind of building up to the very like climactic ending. And there's just so much that this book went through. I was like not expecting whatsoever. And it was just such a great surprise.
Yeah, I feel like this book was, in a weird way, the easiest read of the three. I don't know if you would agree with that, but it just felt so fluid. And so it moved on in a really, for me, at a really good pace. And it wasn't, Charles's writing is a bit more in the details. And because he was writing the first book of this new era, he had to do a lot of establishment and to do a lot of telling you what you're looking at, who you're looking at, why, what you're seeing, just in general. And I think there's a lot of details in that book, and it feels like there's a lot of details in that book. I think with the Test of Courage, when you're moving to the middle grade level, we're focusing a lot more on the emotions of the characters in very much smaller moments than we got in Light of the Jedi, and much smaller stories in a way, and not in a negative way, but it is a smaller story. They're younger characters, and they're going through a different type of adventure. For Into the Dark, I think we get a great mix of the detail and the action and the character and the plot, and it all just fits together like a beautiful jigsaw puzzle, and it just works. And I think it also sets us up for the most exciting vision of the future. And I don't want to talk about the end, but when you think about the end of Light of the Jedi, it's very ominous and you're scared. And then you get to the end of this book and it's not quite as scary, because I am hopeful for these characters in a way that the Light of the Jedi didn't quite allow me to be, because that vision. So I don't know, it just felt so fluid, and so again, like Light of the Jedi, but in a different writing style. Both of them feel quite cinematic. which is so exciting and so fun to read.
It's almost like Into the Dark takes all the best pieces of Charles and Justina's book and like puts it into one. Kind of borrows that world building. It borrows that smaller character driven story and it like puts the two things together and creates something that's just so compelling and just well paced. I heard some people were saying, you know, the first part's boring. I never felt bored. I felt like every single word and sentence I was reading was something new I was learning about the character, whether it's just subtle things about Geode or funny one-liners from Leox or the meditative moments with Comac. Like every single thing is just so interesting. And it's like I wanted to almost like put the book down after every single page and be like, all right, I want to think about this for a moment. But I want to ask you, like, where do you rank this book amongst Claudia's work? And also, how do you rank it amongst the High Republic?
These are both very difficult questions for me, because if you remember our preview episode, I had a trouble ranking in the first place. I think for me, I loved Light of the Jedi, and I really did enjoy Test of Courage, but there's just Claudia's got a little special something. I don't know what it is, but it's real good, and maybe it was the fact that the first chapter of this book is just the best, when Reith is like, actually, let me read it. I'm just gonna read the first line of this book because it's so good. Okay. Reith Silas was about to leave the Jedi Temple for Coruscant for his impressive new assignment on the frontier, and he was miserable about it. Like, those vibes are perfect. They're perfect. So I want to say I rank this one at the top, but they're all so close to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Among Claudia's work, I think I rank it entirely differently and rank it a little bit more in the middle, which is weird for me to say, and maybe I should return to some of those early books that I read, like Bloodline and Lost Stars, but those have such a special place in my heart that I feel weird about ranking anything above them. And even Leia, which the end line to I will never ever forget in my life. So I think I rank it towards the middle of Claudia's work, but at the top of the High Republic. And that's not to say that the High Republic is any less good than Claudia's other work. They're all good, and I'm not good at ranking things.
Yeah, I always feel weird about ranking things, but I thought it would be an interesting question, because I think when you rank things, it could imply that you think the things that are ranked lower are like bad or whatever. I don't think that's the case with these particular rankings, because I think all three books are incredible that have come out for the High Republic. I think all of Claudia's books are incredible. Every single one is 5 stars for me, like without a doubt. I would definitely say, same with you, Bloodline and Lost Stars, such a special place in my heart, but they're all different, very different stories, right? But in terms of just like the actual enjoyment of the experience of reading it, I would probably rank this third for myself, because it's just that new era. It's that new car smell. It's new characters, and you're getting to see Claudia Gray explore Star Wars and the Force in a completely new sandbox.
Yeah.
Which, have we ever got to see Claudia Gray do that? No, she's always been, quote unquote, confined to things that we know, whether it's Leia or whether it's, in Lost Stars, it's all of different eras. Like, this is the first time where you've kind of given Claudia Gray like free reign for something. I mean, even Master and Apprentice was still Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. This is like some brand new character establishment that she's been given the keys to the kingdom and can do what she would like, at the discretion of the story group and that sort of thing. But that's pretty cool. That's a cool experience for her, especially.
I will say, like, we did get the new characters with Thane and Sienna.
But I mean, like, more of kind of the larger picture of things, right? Like, because even like Thane and Sienna are within the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy, and it's all stuff that we know. So this is like the first time we've seen Claudia like outside of that barrier.
Yeah, it's a bit more building blocks. It can be a bit more explorative. In its presentation. And yeah, you're right. And it's exciting to see her really dive into the Force, because we got some interesting tidbits with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan in Master and Apprentice, but we got a whole new level of like Jedi and Force stuff, because we had to really see, I think, Claudia shine in this one. I don't know. Anyway, they're all so good.
This book is definitely, like, if you were to read this and Master and Apprentice and Dooku Jedi Lost together, I would be curious, like, what that's like. If you read those three, like, in a row in some order or fashion. Like, that would be a pretty good time. Because I think they do build... I know Dooku Jedi Lost is Cavan's book, but I think there are some things in this book that are kind of connective tissue to that, tangentially in some way, which is pretty cool. Yeah. And we'll get more into that with the Force conversation, but... Yeah, I would say this is definitely one of my favorites of the High Republic era so far. I can't rank them. It's like picking your favorite child because they all do something different and serve a different purpose, and they're each different genres and mediums for readers. But I would say if you're still kind of trying to figure out if the High Republic is for you, again, there is actually something for everybody. It's pretty incredible what they've done. I just haven't seen something like it in Star Wars in terms of publishing initiatives, and they're really sticking the landing. And I'm sure this is going to be a bestseller by the end of the weekend after we record. It's probably going to be on the bestseller list. I would think.
Better.
Yeah.
But I will say, if you read Light of the Jedi and weren't the world's biggest fan of it, and maybe it was your vision of the Jedi and the politics, and maybe it was the writing style just didn't click with you in whatever way, but you have liked a Claudia Gray book before, pick this one up. Because I feel that it really explores the Jedi in a different way, explores it questions the Jedi in its own way. It also has great characters throughout, Jedi and non-Jedi. It's adventurous. It's a little bit spooky at points.
Yeah.
It has a bit of everything. It has the action. It has the adventure. It has the character beats. It has loss. It has triumph. It has all the emotions. So if that was something you felt like you were missing, perhaps in Light of the Jedi, because there's just so much stuff going on, give this one a shot. I would recommend this one. Claudia, I feel like you can't go wrong even when you don't rank that Claudia book number 1 of your favorite Claudia books, if that makes sense.
Interestingly, you mentioned the word spooky. I think this book was supposed to come out originally in October before the whole initiative got delayed just due to COVID and, publishing industry, that sort of thing. So I think this was like technically originally supposed to be a Halloween themed book in some way. Like, it is a scary book. It's one of those things where if we were reading it in October, it would have been pretty special, to be honest. I'm kind of envious of my, multiverse self that got to read this in October of 2020 and, go out and celebrate at Halloween parties, but cool for him, I guess. But this was a really spooky book. If you like Aliens, especially, or Alien, the Alien franchise, this has got some big Alien vibes. Like, and just in terms of the creepy outer space, maroon space station, kind of, no one hears you scream in space sort of feel. It's some good stuff. But
it's not like scary, because I don't do horror.
It's more creepy.
I'm a baby. Like, I can't do that stuff. But I did when I was reading this book, and I quote, I'm quoting myself when I was reading, spooky, spooky. And I was like, oh man, we just got to a spooky, spooky part of the book. It's fun. It's a fun spooky. So
yeah. Well, I'm really excited. I can't wait any longer to talk about spoilers. So if you're listening to this, now is the time to turn it over to our spoiler section. And we are going to be talking all about this book, just super in depth. And I'm really excited.
Yeah, now that we're in spoilers, I can't believe everybody dies. I can't
believe it either.
Just what a way to go. What a way to do that,
So this is your last chance. Turn back now or continue with us. And with that being said, we give you one final warning. We are now in the spoiler section of Into the Dark. Oh boy, Sarah, it's a doozy. Yeah. Well, we're going to start with our popcorn plot. We did this with Test of Courage. Should be an interesting time. We're going to go through the plot of the book pretty quickly here and just give a little overview of what happened. So why don't you kick us off, Sarah? I'm going to popcorn it over to you.
All right. Anyway, this is me opening my book here for you.
She's going to read the entire book, by the way.
Yeah.
All 430 pages.
I just want to read that opening line one more time.
Set the stage and scene.
Reith Silas was about to leave the Jedi Temple on Coruscant for his impressive new assignment on the frontier, and he was miserable about it. Anyway, Reith, Des Ryden, Orla Jareni, Comac Vetus, all find themselves getting ready to go to the frontier. Who's there to greet them? Not any fancy ship or anything, but this little vessel called the Vessel, led by Leox Gacy, Affie Hollow, and Geode, their rock hypernavigator. Popcorn plot.
So these folks all go into the great unknown, the final frontier of space. Some big Star Trek vibes and some Frozen vibes there for sure. But
yeah.
They travel up, they start kind of flying through space, having some good conversations. Affie and Leox are learning about the Jedi because it's their first time going to Coruscant. Everything seems fine and dandy. What could go wrong? Everything goes wrong. Literally the motto of the High Republic is what could go wrong? Everything. The great disaster happens. They find out it's probably the Legacy Run, which is pretty scary because it's a huge passenger ship. And they find themselves in the presence of a space station because they get thrown out of hyperspace. And here's this creepy looking space station that was made by the Amaxine people. It's very hexagonal. It's very familiar to Star Wars fans, which we will talk about, and popcorn.
And they decide, well, they don't decide. The world decides for them because there's a solar flare coming that they have to get on this ship or else they die. And they also have to save the folks that are also stranded out here or else they die. But it turns out not everybody's a friend. Not everybody's a friend of each other. So things don't go so great. They end up on this station, but there's a little bit of unrest, a little bit of chaos. Popcorn.
Bad enough there's chaos ensuing on the space station and people are disagreeing with each other, let's just say that. Arms are flying off of shoulders and people are shooting blasters. Kids are getting kidnapped. It's the worst possible scenario you could think of. Even worse is the dark side is present, and there's these statues on the space station that all the Jedi think are containing the darkness. There's dark side imbued within them, these old artifacts, and it's kind of holding a spell over the space station. So to make the space station safe for future travelers, since this could be a really great waypoint, they have to take these things off the station. They have to bring them back to Coruscant, purify them, and make sure the dark side is completely dissipated into the cosmic force. So, lo and behold, they go through some stuff. Unfortunately, Des passes away, or at least we think Des passes away. He plays with some helix rings and it blows him to smithereens. They dwell on their sorrow and they travel back to Coruscant and popcorn.
Well, they've got the statues with them. And we love some artifacts here. And they take these artifacts to the Shrine of the Depths, where they do a further spell on them, essentially, with the Force, to keep them in there. But wait. Shoot, says Comac. I
left the oven on.
I can't believe we really darn messed this up. Turns out it wasn't the statues that were keeping the dark, or that were manifesting the dark in the station, but they were keeping the dark at bay. They opened Pandora's box.
Yikes.
Because they're kind of stupid. So they go, oh crap. Oh, also Jorah Malley's dead at this point. R.I.P.
R.I.P. Jorah.
And they decide, well, yeah, they make a decision on their own. Not everybody supports it. That they're going to go back. Affie needs to go back because she's found a secret code. And the Jedi need to go back because they have unfinished business there. They have figured out that Nan is not who she says she is. They thought she was a lonely orphan. No, she's the Nile.
Oh,
dun,
no.
Dun, dun. Not only that, not only is she still there, the darkness has been let out. And we all know that once you open Pandora's box, you cannot put things back in. So they go back. Popcorn.
Lo and behold, there are a ton of Nile ships when they get back. At least one big Nile ship. And they're like, oh god, this could not be worse. What could go wrong? Everything. So they get on the space station. Come to find out, there's killer plants everywhere called the Drangir. Reith gets thrown off the space station in an escape pod to some planet where the Drangir are from. Des is actually alive. He's being poisoned and tortured, and he's disconnected from the Force. He doesn't really know who he is, like almost like a mind wipe in a way. They fight each other. Reath rescues Dez. They come back to the space station. They do the ritual to put the statues back in place and contain the Drengir. But then the Nihil come out and start attacking them. They go, well, actually, we should bring back the Drengir and let them fight the Nihil. So then they redo the curse. There are so many curses in this book being done and undone and done and undone again. So much. The Nihil and the Drengir fight each other. Reath makes a very, very big sacrifice. He opens up the airlock, lets everybody out, saves the day. They get off the space station. They go back to Coruscant. Mission accomplished. The Jedi are like, don't do it again. And he's like, I won't. But you know that won't hold up because this is the High Republic, folks. And that's pretty much it for the book. And Comac takes on Reath as an apprentice. And the Nihil at the very end, we get our boy Martian Rowe in the prologue or in the epilogue saying, hey, by the way, the Jedi are gonna hate their lives. And he's talking to Nan when he says that. He's like, hey, Nan, listen. They're gonna hate their lives very soon. And you're gonna help me do that. You're gonna help me accomplish that. So the Jedi are screwed, basically. Yeah, she's like, cool, I'll do it. Reath betrayed me, it's fine. So that's pretty much it.
I think within that, we should also mention that Geode saves Reath because he's about to sacrifice himself. Affy finds out that the Bind Guild is using indentured servants to pilot their force, which she's not thrilled about. She turns in her foster mom, Scover Bine. I mean,
dang. Tough life. Dang.
Maybe you shouldn't have indentured people. I don't know.
Yeah. You know, I think you'd have to write that one down, Scover. Unbelievable. Well, that's pretty much it for the popcorn plot, Sarah. So I think we can really get into the nitty-gritty of this book. So
yeah, where do you want to start? What do you want to talk about?
Let's start with the characters because I think they're an exciting bunch. We're going to hold off our conversation for Orla and Comac when we talk about the Force in a little bit. But I want to start with Reath because,
my baby boy.
You know, when you talk about that opening line of the book and Reath's whole MO this book is that he loves books. He loves the archives. He loves studying and figuring out how things work. He's very trustworthy. He likes to take on responsibility. He works very hard. He, quote, embraces his bookish ways. And, you know, where some Padawans might prefer lightsaber dueling, he just loves studying and being in the library and loves his books. And his favorite class is ancient history. Like, he loves just learning. So he's really relatable. So he's just kind of always considered Coruscant his home his whole life. And I think that's something, like, I personally related to because I moved a lot growing up to different places. And whenever somewhere would feel like home, my parents would be like, hey, guess what? We're moving somewhere. I'd be like, that's the middle of nowhere. Why are we moving there? And then I would kind of find myself off on this adventure. And if I just sort of opened my mind and let life take me by the reins, I would kind of find, you know, hey, even though this is, quote, the middle of nowhere, there's some opportunity here. And I think that's kind of what Reath learns throughout the book is even though he's going to miss the glittering, prosperous, ascendant city of Coruscant, the skyscrapers, the busyness, his view from his room where he can see the whole cityscape but also be close to the library. It's the perfect location for him to be living in.
Amen.
He realizes that, hey, actually there's a lot of work I can do that's valuable outside of those confines. There's stuff I can do. There's a whole nother path out there for me. My master, Jorah Mali, her last dying wishes before she died was to have me go to the Starlight Beacon and start a new journey as a Padawan, and I have to fulfill that. But I also realize now there's value in that. And so I think his journey in this book is really beautiful, and I personally related to it a lot because I love studying, but I've also moved a lot. I've never really gotten somewhere to call home until like maybe the last 10 years or so, but he's a pretty cool character, and I think he goes through a lot, and despite the loss and grief he feels, he never really fully succumbs to the dark side or feels those intentions. He always keeps his master's words in his mind and her wishes. And I think that really speaks to his strength and his knowledge and his wisdom at such a young age.
Yeah, I think that he's so interesting because he's so unlike the other Jedi we've seen. We see young Jedi Vernestra Rowe in A Test of Courage, and she is just a shining beacon of awesomeness, and she's so great, and she's so good at everything, and she gets to move up and be a full-fledged knight. When we see Anakin, he desires a place. He desires power. He desires to be respected. And Reath is kind of unlike these characters. He's not a fighter. He's not an adventurer. He still doesn't love adventures. But he recognizes that he has to go on this adventure in order to grow. And I see myself in him a little bit different way. I, unlike you, have lived in the same place for nearly 20 years. Pretty much my entire life, I've lived in this place. And when I went off to college, I wanted to go to a place that would challenge me, to a place that I know would be good for me, but would be difficult. And I did that. I moved to the city, and that was a challenging place for me. Adapting to a new social environment was challenging, but also adapting to a new landscape was as well. And ultimately, I learned how to thrive, and I see that with Reath's path as well. He feels like he knows who he is, in the sense that he loves to study. He loves the library. He knows that he's good at these things, and he works really, really hard to be good at everything to the best of his ability, even though he's not the typical Jedi. But when he has to go on an adventure, he recognizes that this is the right thing for him to do because it will mean he will grow. He will grow in the process. And I think that's what's so beautiful about him asking Comac to be his master at the end of the book, is recognizing that he still has an adventure to go on, and that he still has ways to challenge himself that will allow him to grow and better fully realize himself. And I think Comac's reply, and we can talk about it more a little bit later, that, Reath will be a teacher to Comac as much as Comac will be a teacher to Reath. It's also good. I love Reath Silas at the end of the day. He's just great. He's great.
Yeah, he goes through the ringer in this book too, because really the core, the two-pronged relationship that he has in this book is sort of to Des. So there's Des Ryan, who is Jorah's first Padawan, which I think is really cool. And he kind of still keeps in touch with Des, and Des is kind of the cool guy on the Jedi grounds. And then there's Jorah, who's, his master. And she recognizes that Des is kind of the adventurous type. And she also kind of recognized that got Des into trouble sometimes. And it wasn't always the best thing. But for Reath, he's kind of the polar opposite of that. He's very, very, very bookish. He thinks that information is as vital as air, and he can never accumulate enough of it, right? So Jorah, right on page 2, she says, his strength in the Force isn't remarkable, not among the Jedi, but Reath works harder than almost any Padawan I've ever known. He tuned into my thoughts not through his natural gifts, but through effort of will, and he did it faster than the naturally gifted ever manage. He'll go farther than many of them, perhaps in the ways he doesn't yet understand. So she sees a lot of potential in him, and she knows that, it's not just about effort, even though effort always counts. But Reath has enough talent that he can do anything he sets his mind to. And I think that kind of sticks with him throughout the book, that yes, even though he has a little bit of a kerfuffle with the people on board the Amaxine station, he still protects Nan, and he still kind of rises to the occasion with that lightsaber. And he still rescues Des, even though he's facing probably the biggest threat of his entire life with the Drengir and in what they present to him. But he rises to all these occasions throughout the book with almost what it seems like no sort of hesitation on the outside. We know his internal dialogue and what he's thinking, but once he actually makes the choice to take action, it's flawless. He executes it flawlessly. And I think that's because of his will, his talent, his knowledge. He's studied these things, so he knows how just things work, and he's very analytical. And even Des tells him, hey, a lot of knights want adventure, but we also need knights who just want to study, because the Force, there needs to be balance both with the Force and within the Order. We need kind of all sorts of Jedi, and I think that's what creates a better Order, is just having people that are specialized in certain areas. And I think that's why Reath is really cool, because he's just unabashedly himself, but he can really rise to the occasion when he needs to, and be a leader and be a hero.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that the Order is better when there's all these different kinds of Jedi who specialize in these things, because I don't think the Order fully recognizes that. I think the Order wants people to be warriors. And while adventure can help somebody along their path and growth, and I think it's fundamental to that, I don't think that everybody is meant to be a warrior. And I think perhaps that's something that the Jedi completely lose by the time of the fall of the Republic. It's 200 some years later, but it makes me wonder if Reith will ever get back to the books.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of his relationship though with Jorah and Des, whom he thinks that he loses both of them at one point in the book, and he kind of has that moment where he goes to the Kyber Arch, which, if you want to even talk about the Kyber Arch question, that kind of plagues him the entire book and what he kind of understands it to mean by the end. But do you think he did a really good job of sort of compartmentalizing his pain and working through it and kind of never wavering from the path? And like, why do you think, if he did that successfully, like, why do you think that is? Is it just his commitment to those who have come before and the people that believed in him?
I mean, I think he has a lot of respect for those that came before. I think as somebody who studies history, he has a lot of respect for the things that come before, and that's why he spends the time researching and learning about it. Because why would you learn about something if you don't have any respect for the people who wrote it down, or for the history itself? But I also think that he shouldn't have to compartmentalize his pain. And it sucks that he has to do that. And it sucks that he feels that he loses both of these people at the same time, because they both meant a lot to him in different ways. And he was hoping to get to a new phase of his relationship with both of them in different ways. Des maybe be able to become more of a mentor type character. Jorah is going to be able to tell him something, I guess, out in the unknown, and tell him something new about himself and about the Force. And to me, it's a bummer that we do not get more Jorah Malley, because we got a little bit of her in that one interlude in Light of the Jedi. We get a little bit of her right in the beginning in the prologue, but she seems so freaking cool, and it's sad that she's died. But I hope that her legacy will live on in these characters. As for Des, his story is so interesting, and Jorah's choice of Padawans between Des and Reith is fascinating to me, because they are just polar opposites. But I feel like I don't know how to talk about the Kyber Arch. I think it's all about, community and interest, but the Kyber Arch itself is weird and a little sobering.
Yeah, and I love how Des is like, hey, if she asked you to figure that question out, there's probably a reason for it. But people do it all the time. They always cross it alone. But if she's asking you, there's a reason. And I think he keeps trying and trying to figure it out. And I really think it does boil down to community. Like, nobody crosses the Kyber Arch alone, because everybody who came before made it possible to be here today, to be able to cross the Kyber Arch. Yes, I'm walking across it now, but all those Jedi who fought for peace and justice and were guardians and allowed this temple to exist and this community of people to exist is the reason I can cross this arch. So with that in mind, I realized that I can't just sit inside my books all day and study. I can be out on the frontier making a difference. And 200 years from now, during the Phantom Menace, when Anakin Skywalker is studying, he can think of those who've come before as well, and he can look at the story of Reith Silas. But if Reith just sits inside his study room all day and does nothing, there's only so much he can do to be remembered in the books and to make an impact and to contribute to his community. And I think that's sort of the whole idea of the hero's journey in Star Wars is embracing the call, because the idea of the hero is that they reject the call initially and they don't want to take on the role of the hero, and they want to stay with what's familiar, that ordinary world. They don't want to transcend to the special world. And it's sort of funny how there's such a distinct look between the special world and the ordinary world in this. The ordinary world is Coruscant, it's familiar, but the special world is the space station that's very luscious and full of life and nature and plants, and it's so distinctly different. So he kind of rejects that call initially, but he realizes that he needs to embrace the call. He needs to rise to the occasion. He needs to be the Luke Skywalker that leaves Tatooine, even though it's a little uncomfortable, and he just wants to go to the academy. Reith finds out there's more to life than just your books. It's like Bilbo Baggins too, Bilbo sits inside his hobbit hole and he says, like, I just like my books. I like being here and reading my books on my porch. And Gandalf's like, yes, but there's so much more out there that you could do, and you won't be the same when you come back, but it's worth it because you'll discover adventure and you'll discover courage. And you'll get all these things that you wouldn't just get from sitting here and doing nothing, And that's kind of the cool thing about it's really a traditional hero's journey for him when you think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love Reith Silas so much, Sarah.
Me too.
So awesome.
Yeah, he's great.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the subplot of this book, which on the flip side of the Jedi, there is the Outer Rim, the people of the Outer Rim who lead these lives. They're, trying to kind of make a living for themselves. And I think personified as Affie Hollow and Leox Gyasi. And they have a really intimate relationship as friends, but what's their deal and what kind of drives them in this book as sort of intriguing characters?
Yeah, so when we met these characters, we meet them perhaps as a last-minute transportation to the Outer Rim. Were they always supposed to be the ones who were supposed to take them out there? I don't know, to be honest with you. But we meet them as the rinky-dink crew of the Vessel, a ship called the Vessel. And they are members of the Bine Guild, which is a shipping guild. And they are just doing their best to live their life. Affie's parents died. They were pilots of the guild, and Scover Bine took her in as her own. And in this, she has been shuffled around between ships to learn kind of the ins and outs of the guild, and she's really found a home with Geode and Leox on the Vessel. And when they are tasked with this mission to take the Jedi crew to the Outer Rim, there is a lot of fear that the Legacy Run is holding Scover, and maybe she's lost her mom again. Both of her people who have served as mother figures in her life. But it turns out that everything is not as it seems, because for Affie, the loss of her parents is still hurting. And she has not quite found her place in the Bine Guild. And she just wants to prove that she is enough for Scover and the guild. And she finds this code on the Amaxine station that ultimately we realize is a pilot's code, and that pilots came to the Amaxine station because they were indentured, and they took on more risky missions to get time or balance off of their indentured servitude. And Affie is quite betrayed by this. So much so that she realizes that her parents died on the Amaxine station, which must be a horrible feeling to go to the one place in the galaxy that is not only scary because there are sentient plants, but because that is the place where, or around that place is where her parents met their end. And to try and create this new life with Scover, and then to realize that the reason why they're dead is because of Scover. She makes a choice to turn Scover in. And when we met these characters, I had no idea where we were heading with them. But to see Affie's, her resolve to do this, and to betray kind of the only family she has in words. I mean, Leox and Geode are clearly her family as well by the end of this book, and so are the Jedi in a way. But to betray, and I don't say that with a negative connotation either, because she does the right thing, but to go against Scover, to turn her in, and to ultimately disrupt Scover's life work by ultimately dissolving the Bine Guild, she realizes that she's done the right thing for herself and for everybody, and all the pilots there. And that was like a really incredible subplot to me. I don't know. How did you feel about it? Did I leave anything out that was really, really important about that? These characters are just so interesting to me.
No, I think Affie's subplot was really interesting because it seemed, I wasn't sure like where her story was really going. It's not until you get to the Amaxine station that she uncovers this secret. Then it starts to kind of uncover the path of her journey and like what that's going to look like. And yeah, I mean, ultimately she decides my love for Scover can't coexist with my want and desire to eliminate illegal trade practices that are going to hurt other people, but also, most importantly, took my parents away from me because, her parents went there and they tried to use the helix rings, which on the station, there are these rings that you use them and it kind of powers the ships out of the station. It can allow the ship to use 1/10 of the fuel because it's so powerful. It's such a powerful burst of energy. But when misused, it can kill you. And that's what we think happens to Des originally, even though he just takes a pod down to the planet. But that's what happens to her parents. And it really is tragic. She realizes that oftentimes it's the people who are in the most dire situations, the indentured servants, who will do whatever it takes, even the most dangerous missions, to cut a little bit of time off their sentence. And she sees, I don't want anybody to have to go through that or have to make that decision. It's like, that's a horrible choice for any person to ever have to make. And even the Republic, we kind of get this idea that they have some rules against it, against, hazardous incentives and like what's allowed and what's not. But it's still kind of up in the air. And there's this whole other subplot that's 25 years earlier that involves the Hutts and how the Hutts are trying, 200 years before the prequels to build this empire of indentured servants across the galaxy and become a huge crime syndicate that thrives off of fear and servitude and running dangerous jobs for the Hutts. One thing I have always kind of wanted out of Star Wars is more of a discussion on like slavery and indentured servitude and like slave liberation. I thought for sure we were going to get a Stormtrooper rebellion with Finn and how those Stormtroopers in the First Order are kind of slaves. They're mind washed and they become slaves and their brains scraped, as we learned from Resistance. So there was a really great opportunity. I know. So there was a really great opportunity in the sequel trilogy to kind of show the slave liberation movement, especially led by Finn, which would have been really cool as a former Stormtrooper. The prequels, we really haven't gotten that with like Queen's Shadow and Queen's Peril. That kind of became a Sabe plot. That hasn't really been fully realized yet. So there again, Master and Apprentice, another Claudia book. It was kind of brought up with the people of Pijal and how their planet is run by indentured servants, but that was only one book. So when you think about the High Republic, and this is just the first of many books to come, I really hope that this idea of indentured servitude and Affy's story to try to liberate, as many people from this as possible, maybe even outside the Bind Guild. I think there's some really cool things that are explored here that should continue to be explored and talked about in the Star Wars universe, because then it kind of makes us think in our own world as we reflect on our own history and our own current time, and especially in a time of privatized jails and all these other horrible things people have to go through. What does that teach us about ourselves if we talk about this in our stories?
And I also think that like the galaxy is just so big, and we have to recognize that not all planets, not all places, not all cultures are going to live in the same way, and that people will take advantage of other people, and like in our own world and in the Star Wars universe. And I think that it is really interesting that, and I know some people are like, Lena So is cool, but I do not trust Lena So, or I feel that, Lena's politics get a little sticky when it comes to the Outer Rim. But I think what is really notable in this book, if I will give Lena So and the Republic one prop today, I'll give it to the fact that they acted on the Bind Guild stuff when Affy went to report Scover within the day.
Very quick.
It's clearly something that the Republic took very seriously immediately, which I thought was really awesome. And I think it means that something is working. And I do hope we get more discussions about it. And it was Claudia in Master and Apprentice with Pijal and the Churka Corporation and how their labor was slave labor. She was the one who did that whole subplot too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she's got stuff to say about this. And I hope that she continues to talk about it because, and I hope she continues to include the Jedi in it. I hope it becomes a main plot, not just a subplot or, the secondary, because yikes, It's not good. It's not good. It's bad. And I think you make a good point about our own world and the value of labor and how we see people with regards to their labor depending on their background, incarceration status, and life circumstances.
And I think this is actually a really great jumping point to how we're going to talk about the Force and how the idea of the Force being divided and are the Jedi Order right in their ways really is in regards to indentured servitude, and how we often see the Jedi saying, you know, oh, we don't want to take matters into our old hands around slavery. You know, like Qui-Gon goes to Tatooine and rescues Anakin, but he doesn't rescue the rest of the slaves. The Jedi kind of go there, take what they need and leave. But are they guardians of peace and justice? So I think when you have a character like Reath Silas, who's as close to Affy by the end of this book as he is, and if Affy's whole thing in the High Republic is going to be to the slave and indentured servant liberation movement, and she tries to enlist the help of Reath, who is now under the apprenticeship of a person who doesn't see eye to eye with the Jedi, it's going to be interesting to see how is Reath tested. Is he going to make the choice to say, you guys aren't doing anything about this? The Republic did something about it pretty quick when Affy brought it up, but like the Jedi are too laissez-faire. They don't want to do anything. So that's going to test Reath in a way too, to say, do I want to choose this righteous movement to help people versus like what the Jedi Order is telling me I should be doing? And that's often an idea that's brought up in this book is what is the Order telling me versus like what is the Force telling me? Because those are very two different things and they're not the same. And sometimes the Order might be wrong.
Yeah, and like speaking of the Order being wrong and of characters in this book, we can talk a little bit about Jorah and the conversation that she had in Light of the Jedi, when there's this whole conversation of, do we go into war? Do we not go into war with the Nile at this point? Do we fight for these people? And there's this question by one of the masters, I forget who it was, Yariel Poof or Renopo or
one of them. Yeah.
Adamopo. Their names kind of confuse me. I haven't got them all figured out yet. Anyway, one of them says, you know, we can only have peace through justice.
Oh, that was Yariel. Yeah.
Yariel.
That was a Yariel Poof quote.
We have to stay on.
Have to stand long necks in the Star Wars universe for sure. For sure.
Lama Sue, Yariel Poof. Anyway, you know, we can only have peace through justice, but justice means getting involved and doing something about injustice. You can't let the injustice and the oppression just be and be like, we're about peace and justice, but like, and then not do anything about the injustice. So the Jedi are, I like to think they're all high and mighty, but I'll get a little, you know, personal, I guess. For my convocation for college, I had the privilege of hearing Brian Stevenson, the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, speak. And the core thing, I remember it to this day, his speech was so moving. But the core thing was that you have to be proximate to the people that you're wanting to help in order to help them. Get proximate with the issues that you want to help solve and be a part of the solution for. Because if you're just sitting in the high tower, the Jedi Council,
ooh,
you will not be proximate to the important issues. And I think that the Jedi fail to get proximate, and that's where the Jedi's failure is. And they made the choice to fight in that moment, but they are not fighting for every cause, because they are like, you know, we don't want to get political and we don't want to look like we're choosing a side, even though in A Test of Courage, Vernestra Rowe is specifically assigned to accompany and protect one senator's daughter. Like, the Jedi, look in the mirror.
They're crazy.
Anyway.
And when you look at to what the prequel era is now dubbed, it's the fall of the Jedi, which, news alert for anybody that's upset about that, there's a game called Jedi Fallen Order. Did you know about it? The great word of Jedi Fallen Order, that the Jedi fell? There are
We're all over the
actually
place.
people upset about that. That's like, no, it's the fall of the Republic. No, it's the fall of the Jedi because they're hubris. Like Luke and The Last Jedi was spot on. They had hubris.
Yeah.
They didn't look at the Force. They dissected the Force, as Comac said, and they just were like, we're going to live in complete bliss and ignorance. It's fine.
But the problem is the Jedi in the Order, or the Jedi in the Republic, become one.
Yeah.
There is a sense of disconnect between them, kinda, now. But by the time we get to the fall of the Jedi and the fall of the Republic, they are the same. They both fall for that reason.
You know, We Are All the Republic is sort of this initiative that's supposed to be unifying, but I think what we're going to see throughout the High Republic era is that it's actually going to create more problems than it is, just because of the Jedi Order's code of ethics. I think that would maybe work in any other situation where the Jedi aren't part of the We Are All the Republic, because like they have such a different code of like, what does the Force will us to do, and no emotions, no attachments, and all these other things. It doesn't really vibe too well with the Republic, who is like, let's rescue the slaves, and like, let's rescue indentured servants, and like, let's do these things that are, you know, good for people. And the Jedi are like, well, it could be good for people, but it's not what the Force wills. So it's like this whole conundrum of like, we're going to start to see the cracks form over and over and over again until we get to that prequel era. And I think one line from Haig, when he confronts Comac and Orla, he talks about how, yes, you guys rescued us on our ships, but you only did it because it suited your vanity to be the great and wise, saving the poor and helpless. And that's on page 335. And I think that's kind of speaking to the Jedi's intentions, right? It's like, are you guys actually trying to be guardians of the peace? Or are you just trying to have the persona of like, hey, we're better than you and we can save the poor and helpless because, you know, we see you guys need saving. But do they really need saving, or are they just living a different way of life on the Outer Rim? So it's like this whole question of like, what are the Jedi actually doing, and like, is it right? And I think that kind of leads us into our conversation about the Force and how it's presented in this book.
Can I tell you kind of the realization I just had?
Yes.
And why I've been freaking out over on my end? Because the Jedi is an order. It is a religion. It has been called a hokey religion. It is considered by some to be like, wow, those weird monks. The state and the church. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. But the state and the church are like that, you know, like the buddy. And then we go into dividing the Force. So I will hop into this quote from page 128. How does the dark side take form anywhere? Sometimes I think we, the Jedi, must somehow be to blame. We who refuse to look at the Force in full, to examine the darkness as well as the light. If the dark side were not so alien to them, Comac suspected, they could more readily understand the nature of the idols from the station. How can we split the Force in two? How can we justify such an act of violence? And it is violence, such a dividing. Even the darkness divided from the light. I hate to get on the real religion train bus here. I won't stay on it too long, I promise. But when you're looking at Christian religions, there are different ways to interpret and look at the Bible. You can take the Bible literally. You can take the Bible for the parables and stories and for the messages. You can interpret the Bible with today's lens, or you can interpret the Bible with today's lens and read it as if it were written today and what the words on the page mean to us today. Or you can read it with the understanding of its translations and its the different authors of the books and all this different stuff, right? And that turns into completely different ways of looking at the religion. That's why we have, however many denominations of Christianity, or, or different ways of looking at Islam or any of these major world religions. And I think Comac is getting at something here. How can we, the Jedi, fail to even acknowledge the dark side? We're so focused on the light that we say, out of sight, out of mind. It's not in this mind. I'm doing just fine over here. No darkness in me. I'm the most upstanding. That it's allowed to fester and it's allowed to grow because nobody is looking at it and trying to understand it. Or trying to understand where these two different interpretations of the force of the thing can coexist or how they interact in our day-to-day lives. Because ultimately, the dark and the light are intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
The Jedi talk about balance, but it is not a balance of 100% light. Even the Jedi do realize at some point that is not reasonable. But at the same time, when they talk about balance, they fail. They fail to talk about the dark with any sort of weight other than fear about it, instead of understanding it like a historian or what have you. Anyway, I'm stepping off the soapbox. I'll mute the mic. I'll stop now.
You make some great points, and that's just part of our next discussion, which is about the Force and what does it mean to split the Force in two. And I really hadn't thought about this idea of who are we as such an act of violence to split the Force, an act of violence. That's such an interesting way to describe it, and has never been described in that way. But it's so ironic in that way when you think about the fact that this book mentions few people knew the Jedi Temple had been built atop a Sith shrine. And this is the shrine in the depths. It is literally a shrine that they have covered up, that they've built a temple over, that they have built a meditative chamber. They have to take the whole chamber apart. It's like when the hockey ring shares the same stadium as the basketball arena, and they gotta put the basketball thing on top of the ice, and it's like sacrilegious. It's like, what's happening? Oh god, I thought this was hockey and now it's basketball. What's going on? So it's like the dark side and the light side. It's like they built a shrine. They're like, oh yeah, we could just take this apart, and now it's the dark side vibes for now, and they descend down the stairs to this area where a vergence in the Force exists. This is, quote, nexus of power and energy that could be put to many uses, both worthy and wicked. So it's this place where they can go when they find something that's imbued with the dark side, take it, let that energy dissipate back into the cosmic force, and then we're good. It's purification of the dark side. So they're literally not only hiding the dark side from plain sight by building the Jedi Temple and hiding these steps, but they're literally taking any object that they find with the dark side, bringing it to this area, and taking the dark side out and saying, no more dark side for you. We are going to continue to hide it. And it's like, what a more hubris-ridden thing to do than that, right? And it's crazy. And how I love too, by the way, this is all on page 226, how they mention in the distant past of the Old Republic, which I love the mention of the Old Republic. During the ancient Sith Empire, Sith and Jedi had often warred for control of these vergences, and the Sith had held the first one, which was here at the temple. So I just love this idea of there's this kind of back and forth battle between these vergences in the Force and how powerful they can be in performing certain acts, and like that was kind of the bargaining tool and the thing of power back in the Old Republic days. It's like who controlled these hotspots of the Force. So it's all very interesting. The Shrine in the Depths is like the coolest thing I've read about, and maybe that's why I love this book so much, is because that alone is just so cool.
Yes, yeah. I have to firmly agree that it is fantastic.
Yes.
But then that divide, right? The fact that it's built on top of this Virgins that was the Sith shrine, and like nobody really knows about it. And I would imagine that extends to much of the Jedi Order, which goes back to, I believe it's a Wreath quote on 421. Or does the divide only make the darkness darker, more dangerous than it ever would have been
That's a
in a
Comac
state
quote.
Of nature? It's a Comac. Oh, of course it's a Comac quote. I'm so sorry. LOL. Of course it's Comac saying these genius things. This is why I love him. But that idea, I just kind of want to, you know when you like look at something and you're like, okay, yeah,
yeah.
that's what I'm doing when I read this quote, and I'm like, he's right. He's right, you know? Because when you talk about this, they talk about balance, right? They talk about finding balance within yourself, but then they go around and they're like, we have to purify it from the darkness. No darkness. They're so backwards. They like, the Jedi, even at this point, even when they're in their prime, are so upside down, inside out. They don't even know which way their moral compass is looking sometimes, it feels like, because they're like, we're not political, we don't fight, but also let's get into this war. You know, I love the Jedi, but like, I'm also so frustrated with them sometimes.
Yeah. And I want to kind of expand on the first part of that quote from Comac that you mentioned, which he says, the darkness is as much a part of the Force as the light. This is the best part, folks. Get yourself straight. Grab your armrests, get ready for the chills that are going to go through your body. The Order thinks it can bisect the Force so neatly, as though the primal living energy of all existence were a thing to be sliced and served. And I just think of, like, you know, neatly cutting apples and like serving the little apple slices, right? So it's almost like the Jedi think, you know, they can cut the apple into slices, and this piece of the apple doesn't look so great. I'm going to toss that one out. So I'm just going to keep the very nice apple slices, but if you do that, you're not keeping the entire apple when you serve it. You're only giving the best glorious parts of it, the shining parts. You're wasteful. It's wasteful, you know? Those bad pieces of the apple are what go to, you know, the garbage, but they could still be eaten. They could still be consumed. I think to the idea of history and how we always need to acknowledge history or else we're doomed to repeat it. So if all the Jedi are ever doing is covering this vergence in the Force that's underneath the temple and the Sith shrine, if they're never acknowledging this Sith shrine, if they're not kind of letting these artifacts live and breathe and to teach about them and to let the Jedi know what they are, they're doomed to repeat themselves. And that's what we see. You know, for so long, they deny the dark side as a natural part of the Force that's supposed to be balanced. And what happens is Palpatine 200 years from now comes to power. And I think that's what the Acolyte 2 is going to be about. I think it's going to be the culmination of everything we're seeing in these books. And then the Acolyte is kind of like the nail in the coffin. Like, now that the dark side has been able to lay dormant for so long with the Jedi just kind of ignoring it, now it's going to really boil to the surface so that when we get to the Phantom Menace, Palpatine is ready to set his motion into play. And the Acolyte is going to teach us about how the Jedi were fools, basically, you know? So the Jedi just don't appreciate history, and that's why they're doomed to repeat it. And that's why the Sith will control Coruscant and the galaxy and rule for many years and cause destruction and chaos and harm.
But also, I think we got to recognize, well, first I want to go back to your apple metaphor. You can either slice the apple, which is an okay way of eating an apple, or you can bite right into the apple.
You could.
When you bite right into the apple, you can get all the pieces of the apple, right? And you get the dark with the light. I don't know. But also, history is written by the winners. Who won? The Jedi.
Uh-huh.
Who erased the fact that they were on a Sith temple?
The Jedi.
I'm gonna bet you it's the Jedi.
Which, can I please mention here too?
Go ahead.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because we know Comac Vitus is a folklorist. He collects...
I love my man.
He collects legends and histories.
Yeah.
You bring up a point about the winners write history. So... Yeah. Reith asks him around page 36, you know, how do you find these legends? And Comac tells him there are always the stories that people want to tell about themselves. And then there are the other stories, the secret ones, the dark ones, the ones whose meanings are more difficult to comprehend. Those aren't the ones they offer to outsiders. Of course, those are generally the most important of all.
Yeah.
So if the winners are writing history, but they're kind of leaving those important stories out of the narrative, you know, the story of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, right? If that's not a story the Jedi would tell you, right? Oh my God, my mind's blown right now, right? So it's literally all baked into Star Wars, and I can guarantee you, like, this idea of stories and legends, the legend of Dark Plagueis the Wise, the story the Jedi wouldn't tell you. It's all connected, right? And the Jedi only want to show the version of reality that they think is right. And that's where they lose.
Yeah.
So
think about Jocasta Nu saying like, if it's not in our system,
it does not exist.
It doesn't exist. If Kamino's not here, it does not exist. Which is another way of like looking at academic in history and like, was she attempting to cover something up, or did she just truly not know and have such a view of her own position within that world of the Jedi archives? But also like, the Jedi are clearly writing history in a way that is sanitized to an extent. And it's interesting to me that, Comac is renowned as a scholar and a mystic, and he's well published, and he's a folklorist. I think Reith says that like over half the papers and books he's read have had footnotes of Comac's work. And it's really interesting to me because if more people were reading these things, perhaps they would have a different view of the Force, because Comac seriously like tends to be, he's someone that, though we don't have his academic writings, although here are some new things I want from the High Republic. Those Jedi those romances from Light of the Jedi.
Yeah.
And also Comac Vetus's academic papers. Oh my god.
Please.
The thrill.
Give it to us.
Oh my gosh. Okay, anyway, I'm going to calm down. But it seems to me like he would be injecting a more complicated vision of the Force at times, and a more complicated vision of history than perhaps some in the Order might want to see or believe is the right way to look at things, or maybe like subconsciously, are interested in. But maybe more Jedi should just spend time in the library and read Comac's writings. It's a thought. But I mean, we kind of answered this question throughout. But like, are the Jedi right? And we can go into like way seekers. Clearly not everybody's following the Order. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a great question to ask at this point, because the way seeker is a really interesting concept. It's described as a Jedi who operate independently of the dictates of the Council. So it's almost like this way to gain a deeper understanding of the Force when you don't necessarily see eye to eye with the Jedi. And it kind of all goes back, I think, to that 25 years earlier, where, they're in this situation where they have to rescue hostages, and in Orla's mind, the Jedi say, oh, whenever you're in the situation, rescue the hostage first and then take care of your enemy. But the Force in that moment's kind of telling her, no, do the enemy first and then rescue the hostage. But she follows the hostage first rule. And it actually ends up having, Monarch Castle killed. Mm-hmm. And this kind of teaches her, it says here, quote, it would be many years before she fully reckoned with that moment and realized that if the Order was telling her to ignore the Force, it wasn't the Force that was wrong. Damn. Good stuff.
Oh my god. This stuff is so good. It's so good. I love these characters.
I love the idea of her recognizing that she never wants to live the life of a lie, that she will never put what's quote unquote right and proper, which is what the Jedi teach you, ahead of what the Force is telling her, because the Force is what she should be listening to as a Jedi. She shouldn't be listening to other Jedi. She should be listening to the Force. And that the Jedi, as we know, are perceiving the will of the Force incorrectly. And that's sort of where they go wrong, because they think, they almost think they're higher and more mightier than the Force itself, because they think of themselves as the vessels, which like that's so irresponsible to think like you are the vessels through which the Force speaks. Like you, because you have control over the Force. That makes you more entitled to that. Whereas the Force connects all living beings, not just the Jedi. So great job, guys, I guess. But I think the fact that she's a way seeker, right? She's seeking her way. And we think of too, like the Wayfinder. I don't know if that's kind of an interesting terminology there, but it's really cool. And I know we've talked about.
Can we pause?
What's that?
Can we pause and just go, oop? Way seeker?
Linguistics?
Wayfinder?
Whoa. Interesting. Much to think on.
Could we get a cool artifact like McKay's Wrath device?
Ooh. What if, Sarah? I know you love the Kazrith device. I know.
I do.
Yeah. And I just want to say one more note on kind of this idea of the Wayseeker, as I've seen the stupid Screen Rant article about it being compared to Grey Jedi. You know, as the wise words of Luke Skywalker, it's time for the Grey Jedi to end. The Grey Jedi, I think, just lacks a lot of nuance. It's sort of this kind of blanket term that's used way too much in Star Wars. And I really think we just kind of need to throw it out completely out of Star Wars terminology, because Wayseeker is the new Grey Jedi. Like, orange is the new black. This is it.
Better.
And it's way better because I think it actually has meaning behind it versus just like the simplicity of Grey Jedi, which is like, well, they're not dark and they're not light, so it must be gray. And I think that's just like kind of not, doesn't really invite much of a conversation into the Force. And I think like I was so excited about the Wayseeker because I could finally put like a name to a concept, but also a name that had some like real meaning behind it. So I kind of hope that we adopt this as sort of the go-to for Grey Jedi. Again, I hate saying it. It makes me cringe. But I think that's one of the things I love most about this book was Claudia introducing this concept and really developing it. And I think we'll continue to see it developed because Orla's story is not done. Which, by the way, she's a total badass too. Her lightsaber is sick.
She's
so cool. Yeah.
She's so cool. I mean, I want to talk a little bit about the Wayseeker specifically because on page 18, they do detail some of the ways that people have taken their paths as Wayseekers before. And it says that some have included solitary activities like meditation on a mountaintop or helping revolutionaries on a tyrant-ruled world, or even, in one legendary instance, becoming a minor singing sensation on Alderaan. Now, there's a lot
baked in there.
There's a lot happening in that sense because you ended on minor singing sensation on Alderaan. You're like, whoa. But there's a really interesting little bit in the middle here where somebody, at least one person, has left the Order to fight oppression and to liberate a world.
Fancy that.
And that, when we go back to Light of the Jedi, and Yariel Poof saying that there can be no justice, or no peace without justice. Our good old Avatar Kyoshi also says this. We have to stand again. It really makes you think. It really makes me think. But also I think it's really interesting that the Wayseeker's path has taken so many different turns. Becoming a singing sensation on Alderaan is a thing. I don't know what kind of music they were singing. Don't know if they went on Alderaan's next, or Alderaan's Got Talent, or what have you.
I want to watch. That should be a Disney Plus series.
Oh, yes. First of all, yes. Second of all, yes.
Let's tweet that at Bob Chapek.
But I find this whole idea very interesting because, yeah, I can understand why you'd leave the Order to become a singing sensation. Those things don't really seem very compatible. Meditation on a mountaintop, I understand where you'd have to kind of go outside of the dictates of the Order because that's a very solitary, introspective activity. And while the Order encourages meditation and balance and that sort of thing, I would imagine being on a mountaintop for an extended period of time is a different sort of thing. Helping revolutionaries on a tyrant-ruled world, fighting for peace and justice. It's kind of exactly what the Order says they kind of want to do. So that's interesting to me. And it makes me a little, again, doubtful of the whole Order. Why do we even have an Order if we have to leave the Order in order to do something like that?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying the individual Jedi are bad. Most of them were taken as babies. It's not their fault. But I think that some of the fundamentals are off base. And I think that's kind of what we got at in this conversation. That the fundamentals might have good intentions, but they are not where they need to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this whole idea of are the Jedi right really pivots around Orla and Comac.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really surprised by this book using that kind of 25-year-old story as a framing device. You know, their bond with each other goes back so far. and it's so intertwined, and it almost seems like they're kind of going on the same path, but just in different ways, right? Because Comac is more allowing of anger, whereas Orla Jareni has a more primal connection to the Force, and that's kind of where they differ a little bit. And it goes back to how he lost his master, right? And he lost his master, and when he does, Orla tells him to, I guess reflecting on that, Orla says, we can overcome our anger. And he goes, why? Why should I overcome it? If I cannot feel anger over the loss of such life, in reference to Des in present day, then I cannot feel anything at all. The Order asks us to excise the deepest parts of ourselves, and for what? So that a young man may die unmourned? And when he lost his master earlier, he felt like he had his guts torn out by a Rancor's claw. So he kind of feels like it's cruel that the Jedi say no attachment, even though they give you these master and apprentice relationships that become like a family and become like parents to each other, a parent and a son and a parent or a daughter. And it's like, how do you expect that you can kind of separate the emotion out of that relationship? And it's kind of, makes you think about Obi-Wan. You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you.
I loved you.
And Obi-Wan was never really allowed to openly exercise that emotion to Anakin, and I think that's exactly what Anakin might have needed to hear. So Comac's like, why can't we just be human? Like, why can't we just be mortal beings who have emotions? We're sentient. We're a sentient species, and this is kind of the essence of life. Why can't I exercise that?
Anyway, I'm sad now. Time to pack it in. The Jedi Order makes me sad. This has been a good one. I'll catch you in the next episode. I think you've hit all the good stuff. He's saying the unsaid, and it's unsaid in Light of the Jedi by Skier and by Buryaga and oh god, Avar and Elzar. It's something that the Order needs to think about a little bit. I don't know. Emotions are good. Emotions help us cope, help us get through. And he's right. Why should I overcome it? Why are we suppressing these when these emotions help us through some of these feelings and some of these experiences?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, on a less depressing topic, I think we've talked quite a bit about the Force and the Jedi Order, and I think Into the Dark does a really great job. When you think of the title Into the Dark, it obviously means, into the dark of the space station, what lies within the dark hallways, the plants, the Drengir. But it also could mean, into the dark side of the Force, like, into the dark side of ourselves, and dealing with emotion and grappling with loss of life. And I love that the High Republic isn't shying away from that. But, Sarah, we're not going to shy away, too, from some of the more positive, uplifting things of this book. And I solely want to talk about Geode, the Rock.
Geode? The Vintian from Vint?
Yes, him.
Our favorite rock hyperspace navigator?
The Wild Man.
Hitting the clubs.
Sarah, did you know if you actually cannot pronounce his name correctly unless you don't have a mouth? So that's why they nicknamed him Geode.
Which is funny because like a geode is like when you crack a rock.
Yeah.
And on the inside it's a bunch of crystals.
Amazing.
Amazing.
One of the greatest additions to the Star Wars universe.
Period.
That's the
end of the sentence.
Claudia's excellence in writing this book was dropping little things here and there that just made it feel like Geode was as much a part of the scene as anybody else. And
yeah.
Like you kind of read it as a reader and you're like, oh yeah, Geode, it's just he's acting up again, or oh yeah, he's being kind of quiet right now for some reason. And like you as a reader kind of start to experience that along with like Reith, who's like, am I talking to Geode? Like, did he just rescue me? Like, you're my hero, Geode. Like, what's going on with Geode? What did you think of Geode? Like, what? I don't even know how to start with this character, honestly, but we need concept art now, Lucasfilm. Drop it. Oh my God, please.
Geode is, I will never ever tire of Geode humor. It is funny every time I've read it. even if I've read the same passage over and over again. Like the one where it's like, where's Geode? Hitting the clubs. God only knows what times he'll be back. Some days that guy's gonna have to slow down. And that is hilarious. It's so funny. It's so funny. I will never be over it. And this book is called Into the Dark. These losses are kind of heavy. This exploration of the Force is not exactly light. I mean, I know we love having this conversation, but like it's a bit of
it's a lot.
A mental game. But Geode is here for the humor. And next time we see Claudia in person at a book signing, whatever, I will just thank that woman for Geode specifically, because it's just so funny and he's so weird. And who would have thunk that a rock character would be a thing in Star Wars ever? I know we've got a lot of weird aliens and things, and I think other franchises, Trek does a better job at kind of humanizing and giving real world I guess humanizing is the best descriptor, but humanizing their aliens and not making them all for nothing. I think Star Wars can sometimes do like throwaway aliens and creatures and things, and this did not feel like that at all. Like, I want to know more about Vintian, or I want to know more about the Vintian people. I want to know more about Vint, the planet. Do they live in wood houses? Do they live in rock houses? Heaven forbid rocks live in rock houses.
Do they play rock, paper, scissors with their neighbors?
Oh my god, it's genius.
What if the neighboring planets are full of people or of beings that are paper or like trees?
Oh my god,
like tree people, and then like the other planet is just full of scissors that like walk.
That's too funny. That's too funny. I don't know. I had such a blast with this character, and I want to see more of him. He obviously doesn't have a mouth. He doesn't speak, but other people speak for him and give him his character, and he seems like a blast. I mean, he goes with Orla to help her choose out a ship. I just love that everybody's totally by the end of the book accepts Geode's appearance and Geode's kind of idiosyncrasies, and his weirdness, and kind of goes with it. They're just like, yeah, that's just my buddy Geode.
Yeah, I love to like at one point it says Geode was giving Leox the death glare when Affy and them are trying to figure out like what weapons can we bring back to the Amaxian station. She says, Geode, some, let's say, interesting characters. Somebody who might sell a little on the side, maybe a thermal detonator or two. And then it says, Geode's knowing look spoke volumes, which is just so funny because he doesn't speak. It's what is the knowing look? He doesn't have eyes. He doesn't have a mouth or nose. It's just a rock. So just the perception of the rock, it's just genius. I don't even know how else to describe it. Like, I need to know more about this character. And the fact too that him and Leox had this like really weird detour with a Rhodian who wanted to be worshipped by this fearful populace, and it ended up, the populace worshipping Leox and Geode, and they made a plinth carved in Geode's honor, and then they sacrificed flowers, they chanted, they lit incense, and now there's a planet apparently called Leoxo. That needs to be a comic, genius. By the way, like a spin-off comic. I need to know what happened on this mission. I really hope that happens at some point. But just like all these really funny things that are just make you put down the book, laugh a little bit. And yeah, even though this book, like you said, is filled with some pretty heavy concepts, it's like that one little line about Geode always brought a smile to my face. And like, that's what I appreciated the most about it.
He's perfect. Yeah. He's perfect. And he adds just the right amount of levity to the action and the dramatics of the book. And he's perfect. He's flawless, iconic. I'm ready for my Geode fan cam. I'm ready to join the Geode fan club. Geode, man. Iconic.
Truly iconic.
What a great addition to the Star Wars universe. 11 out of 10. Would recommend.
You could say he's a rock solid character.
Oh. Snaps for you.
I'll wait for the applause from our listeners. Sarah.
Yeah.
We're going to go into a little bit of a segment here before we close out the episode called Odds and Ends. Nicely named by you. Great job. So this
Yeah,
is
it was all I had in my brain. So if it changes next episode, just like don't worry about it, guys.
So this is where we're going to talk about things that we didn't necessarily get to, but we felt were either important or were fun Easter eggs that we wanted to bring up. So it's kind of like our odds and ends that we would like to get through before we close out the episode with a little bit of what's next. So I would like to start, Sarah, with something I thought was pretty cool because I do love me some prequel love. I do love me some Attack of the Clones.
Me too.
I do love me some Obi-Wan going to a particularly familiar diner with some red seats and some waiters rolling around on their wheels. And wait a second, isn't that where the place being described where Affy and Scover Bine are eating? It's Dex's diner. Into the Dark. It's not named, but that's it. You can't tell me that you're on Coruscant in a red seated diner with roly waiters and that's not him. I don't think he's there yet because he's probably not alive at this point. However, the idea that this diner has been passed down for many generations, maybe it's a family business, maybe this is Dex's great-great-great-grandfather or grandmother. I love that idea that this thing exists in this time period. And I had to put the book down and I was like shouting because I was so excited about it.
It's a great little Easter egg, and it's so funny because I didn't catch it on the first read, and you were like, go look at this page, Sarah. You didn't text me about it. Go look at it. And I did, and I was like, oh my God, you were right. Like, and who doesn't? Because when we were talking about like the 800 playable, non-playable characters in Lego Skywalker Saga, I was like, Dex better be playable. I'm just glad we're getting some mentions of Dex or some thoughts of Dex because he's underappreciated, man.
Yeah, this is on page 239, by the way. So if you want to go back and read that section and get the description, it's all there for you, folks, and it's wonderful. So, Sarah, what is your odds and ends item next?
So my big one for this book is actually when they're back on Coruscant and Reef is back in the Jedi archives, as you would, and he comes across this book, or he opens up this book that he has neglected in recent years. 275 to 76. It is a book of fairy tales and legends of the core worlds, and these figures were familiar from songs that were taught to children throughout the core worlds, and even kids in the temple were taught these songs. And some of these songs and fairy tales and legends were rooted in fact, like the good princess Chiaya of Alderaan or the Ithorian pirate Bluebrow. I want to know these songs. I want to know these fairy tales and legends. Star Wars, make it happen. We have myths and fables. We have dark legends. We're getting the holiday special version of these fables and things.
Yeah.
Where we've been talking about one of my favorite things in all of Star Wars is Star Wars music genres. Give me the Star Wars children's music. Also sea shanties. Okay, that's all. That's my odds and ends.
Another thing worth noting, this is actually a pretty big one in terms of connective tissue, but the Amaxine station appears to be the station that Snoke is on in the Rise of Kylo Ren comic book. So if you actually go back and look at the picture of that station, it fits the description pretty much to a T. Honestly, it's this hexagonal panels on this sort of orb. You got these like lower and upper rings that are all kind of interconnected. The inside of the station that Snoke is on has a lot of plants. So I just love the idea that, of course, Snoke is going to end up going to this place that was once riddled and possibly still riddled with the dark side. I mean, is he controlling the Drengir? Are they still alive at that point in time? Who knows? Have they been put back in their place and kept at bay from the darkness? So, I don't know if it's the same exact station because we learn that, once Reith fires off all the different pods that kind of take people from into the station and kind of leaves it abandoned so that neither the Nile or the Drengir can use it for, opportunity and for mischief. But it makes you wonder, how does Snoke find it? How far out are we in the unknown regions right now? It's just very interesting stuff. And I love that little bit of connectivity, especially with Charles being a part of the High Republic Initiative. I'm sure he had some sort of play in this, or I would love to go back and look at all the different little Easter eggs that were dropped to us, and we might not have ever realized it, you know?
Yeah, and I think for this one specifically, if you were like me and you were having a little bit of trouble envisioning what the Maxine station looked like and just kind of the big picture of it, you sent me that great image of it from the outside, and I was like, oh, that makes a ton of sense. So if you are like, I don't really understand the way that this station works and the layout of it, that is the place to look for it, because it pretty clearly shows it or something very, very similar to it. The next one I want to dive into is something that I thought was great, a little bit oddly introduced as to why Affy was safe on this ship, and I was just like, oh, it makes me slightly uncomfortable. But it's great because Gion's not going to go into his mating smelt for another 9 years, so he's fine. But we get some implied asexuality from Leox in this book, and more ace rep in Star Wars, we love to see it.
Isn't Vi Marati ace as well, I believe?
Yes.
So, and we didn't talk about Leox enough. Again, we try to cover as much as we can. There's just so much to go over, but I think Leox is such a great character. He's been described as sort of Matthew McConaughey in space, which is hilarious. And he's got the shirt open, the bees that he has on him. So he's a really great character, and he's always kind of that glass half full kind of character that Reith tries to aspire to be, because Reith is very glass half empty. That's pretty cool. Yeah, the actual quote where he mentions it in the book, he says, I possess no desire to reproduce, nor, and more to the point, no desire to perform the actions of reproduction with no generative goal in mind. And Affy asks him, you mean you don't have sex? He says, I've tried it out, not an unpleasant practice to be sure, but in my case, it's not an imperative, for which I've always have been grateful. Seems to free up the mind insofar as I can judge the minds of other beings. Certainly frees up a whole lot of time, and I relish the knowledge that I am the ultimate fulfillment of my ancestral line, the point to which all their striving led. And it just really, that last part right there is just so Leox. He's very much just like, it's going to end with me. So, that's part of it. But I do also, yes, love the implied asexuality, because we need more of that representation in Star Wars. And not every character has to have a romantic interest.
I do want to say, with the Leox point and him saying, like, I realize that I'm the end of this line, and I know that I'm the best that I can be. But it's also him being totally comfortable in his identity and understanding, like, I'm perfectly fine just the way I am. And not only am I fine, I am good. And I don't have to worry about this, because I don't have to feel less than because of my lack of sexual attraction. Like, that's okay with me, and I'm chilling. I'm good.
Yeah, no, he's fully.
I can worry about being a good pilot and a good good person or whatever.
Yeah.
And not saying But.
Yeah, he's just fully embraced it, and I love that for him. Honestly, he's a fantastic character, and I hope we get more of him for sure. So my last bit here is the Barash vow. So I think Dez goes through the ringer in this book. We see him really lose his connection to the Force because of how much he's tortured by the Drengir, and he says he's going to take the Barash vow, which is this commitment to gaining ultimate communion with the Force. So it's like you could spend years or decades trying to renew that connection, because I just thought it was a really interesting idea that you can establish a connection to the Force, but it can just as easily be broken, and you can need to rediscover it. And so he's really down in the dumps after he's rescued, because he realizes it's almost been tainted in a way. And he needs to almost go back to the beginning, where it all began, and relearn that path towards the Force. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting idea that we haven't really explored. We often have those superhero tropes of the superheroes losing their power, like Spider-Man 2. It's kind of cool to see that trope carry over into the Star Wars, The Force isn't always something you'll just keep at all points in time. You can struggle with it. So I think that's pretty neat. Well, Sarah, that about wraps it up. So we're going to close out here with Into the Unknown. Into the unknown. We have
cut that out.
We have 4 months left until the next slate of High Republic books. It's going to be a long wait, but we got a couple things holding us off in the meantime. But I think looking back at these first 3 books, which will have a more comprehensive phase, quote unquote, phase 1.5 preview in the, towards the summer, where we'll kind of talk about what's next and looking back at this first set of books. But really, I think you can kind of split it up between the Republic, the dangers against the Republic, and the Jedi. So the Republic, you have this idea, that we learned in this book, how these 2 planets, Arono and Irium, have always kind of conflicted with each other, but came together when they got kidnapped, and the Jedi came to their rescue, and they realized that independence is an illusion, and we should be, trusting each other, because trust is hope, and trust is believing in a better future. So, like, having the Starlight Beacon in this very spot where they were rescued so long ago by Vitus is kind of that representation of, like, what the Republic is possible. What's possible in the Republic when people come together and don't shut each other out. So I thought that was really cool. But it also kind of brings it back to the idea of, again, is independence actually an illusion, or sometimes independence good? But it's interesting. And then you have the Nile, who, if they ever come into contact with the Drengir, by the way, are crazy intense and scary. And the fact that they can regrow together, and that even the Sith feared them enough.
And they're hunting for meat.
Yeah, like the Sith trapped them, and they were scared of the Drengir. Like, that's terrifying to me. And then you have the Jedi, which we see the cracks forming in the belief in the Jedi Order, and even Comac says, I have doubts about whether the ways prescribed by the Jedi Council are invariably the best course to follow. So I think this is really opening up the idea of the Lost 20. Comac might be one of the first of that bunch. But we have all these moving parts. Like, what do you kind of see as sort of the overarching picture of what's next? I really think that the Republic and the Jedi is going to really struggle internally. The Republic is going to continue to struggle to bring more people and more planets into their folds. And then the Drengir and the Nile are probably at some point going to link up and be like the ultimate danger, especially with Martian Ro, who we know is just kind of hell-bent on destruction right now.
Yeah, so for me, I feel like this book, as I said at the top of this episode, paints actually the kind of most hopeful picture, because we have Reath asking Comac to be his master, and he accepts, and there's this, I'll read it. I still have much to learn, Master Comac said. That sounded like even more a no, until he added, and there is no better way to learn than to teach. You will be my first Padawan, Reath, and perhaps my greatest instructor in the Force. And now that you say Lost 20, now you got me thinking. Because I think Reath might challenge him a little bit, but they also have a similar worldview that I think is, or that Reath is coming into what Comac's worldview, with age kind of thing. Anyway, I think that is a beautiful relationship, and I'm really excited to look forward to where it goes, because I love both Reath and Comac. They're both wonderful, wonderful characters that I identify with and admire and respect, so I think they're both very, very interesting within the Order. For the Republic, well, I guess I'll keep talking about the Jedi for just a second here. I feel that the Jedi Order is going to keep doing everything as normal. They're going to keep being like, we're good, we're great, we're fine, we're good, until muck hits the fan and they can't ignore it anymore. Now we know that somebody by the name of Trennis becomes a member of the Lost 20. Is that Keeve? We don't know. But I think somebody's going to have to drop to the dark side in order for them to finally come to terms with themselves. So I don't know when that's going to happen. I feel like they're going to keep going business as normal. Everybody's going to be doubting in some way. We have Avar and Elzar, who clearly love each other. I just want them to
Me too.
live a happy life together. I want them to cuddle. We have Vernestra, who's this master with a Padawan now at 16, which Vernestra's awesome, but that's such a mess. We have these guys. We've got Orla. You know, everybody's got an issue with the Order in some way, or everybody's struggling in some way, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it. And I feel like that will continue to be a problem under the surface until something finally breaks the surface. With the Republic, I don't know about the Republic. I don't know how I feel about the Republic. I don't know if I've as formed thoughts about the Republic. Clearly at the end of this book we get Queen Thandeka is rebuilding the relationship between Irium and Arono, and that's why the Starlight Beacon is there, and the importance of it and the symbolism, and they're on the up and up. You know, they defeated the Bind Guild, but I don't quite know. For the Nihil and the Drengir, either the Nihil and the Drengir are going to team up and be like, I'm going to get you a lot of meat. Here's some meat. It's the Jedi.
We have the meat. Drengir. Yeah. They're the new Arby's.
Yeah. Or it's going to be like Nihil. We have the meat.
Yeah.
For the Drengir.
Parentheses. Somebody please Photoshop that.
For the Drengir.
Oh my God.
But either they're going to team up, or the Nihil are going to attempt to control them in a way to unleash them, kind of like what happened in this book. And it depends on what the Drengirs, if the Drengir concede to working with the Nihil in order to have more destruction. I don't quite know. I think the Jedi's path is most clear to me at this point, but it's all very interesting. I feel like we have infinite paths here of where these characters are going to go. So that's exciting.
So that's it for our review and our discussion on Into the Dark. Again, really, really love this book, and it's just so much fun, and I probably will reread it, honestly, because it's just that good. I don't reread a lot of books, but I feel like I could learn or relearn a lot more just from going through it again and kind of seeing through the eyes of these characters once again.
How many ounces of medicinal spice would you give this out of 5?
Ooh.
The medicinal spice that the vessel is carrying secretly.
Out of 5?
I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a clever star rating.
5 spices out of 5.
5 spices out of 5. Yeah, I mean, same.
It's just that good. Honestly, I stick to my one tweet that the only thing Claudia Gray can't do is write a Star Wars book that's rated less than 5 out of 5 spices at this point.
5 out of 5 spices, yeah.
But if you enjoyed our book review, we have a lot more to come. So next on Friends of the Force, for our book coverage, we have a couple more episodes before then. But our next book will be Victory's Price by Alexander Freed. I have the review copy. I am reading it. Sarah's reading it as well. That's all we can really say about it at this point, because the embargo is still up for a couple more weeks.
Yep.
So I'll leave it at that. But we are also going to be reading Attack of the Clones, the novelization by R.A. Salvatore. So we are very excited for that. But that's going to be on our Patreon. So if you want to listen to that episode, you can join our Luminous Beings Patreon tier. And we also have our Phantom Menace discussion on our Patreon as well already. So very exciting stuff. But Sarah, where can our listeners find you until our next episode?
You can find me on Twitter and Goodreads and Letterboxd at SEH221, where I talk about movies and books and how sad I am sometimes, I'll be honest with you.
I can relate.
It's just kind of the way the world works right now.
A lot of my tweets have just been a mix of sad or standing the hell out of the MCU. And now it's award season, so we'll have something happy to tweet about.
Yes, movies.
Very excited.
Actually, we'll probably grumpily tweet about these things because it's all absolute nonsense
it's just
anyway.
A crapshoot right
we
now.
have fun.
Yeah. Well, as for me, you can find me at Brad Whipple. You can find the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Make sure you're following us so you get all of our new episodes. And please share this episode wherever you're listening to bring the show to other new listeners. And leave a 5-star rating if you're so generous to help that algorithm boost our podcast up on the charts. You can also join our Patreon at patreon.com/Friends of the Force. Thank you to Anna, Brian, Cheryl, Deborah, Donnie, Elegy, Jessi, Heroes of the Galaxy, Knights of Ren, Levi, Lindsay, Marie Claire, Neil, Rachel, Sarah, and T. So thank you all for your support on the Patreon. Thank you all for listening to this 2-hour episode. I think, Sarah, you and I put together 7 to 9 hours of coverage on the High Republic when you put our preview episode in there too.
I'm so sorry.
Hey, listen, that's what we do. It's great. I've had a lot of fun, actually. And even though it's been a lot of editing, I have just really enjoyed this ride. So I hope you've all enjoyed it too, listening to our book reviews and talking through this new era in Star Wars storytelling. So it's a very, very good time. With that being said, everybody, thank you so much for listening once again. And until next time, may the Force be with you always.
Bye.